Hi, welcome to Beyond Politics. I'm Catherine Clark. Ontario Liberal MP John McCallum was born and raised in Montreal, but he went to Cambridge and then the Sorbonne before returning to Canada to work in academia. Then he became the Chief Economist at the Royal Bank before politics came calling. He answered the call, he served in cabinet, he now sits on the opposition benches, and he joins me now to talk all about his life beyond politics. John McCallum, welcome to Beyond Politics. It is just great to have you here.
Great to be here, Catherine.
Thank you for agreeing. I know you've got a busy schedule.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
So you're wearing a pink tie, and let's start with that, because I just think you look tremendous.
Well, thank you.
Do you find that the Hill is a kind of environment that's conducive to trying different things? I mean, there are a lot of men on the Hill. And a tie is really the only form of expression for men, mostly. Do you shake it up?
I got this tie from my son, who's perhaps a bit more adventurous in ties than I am, and I'm happy to wear it. Nobody's criticized or made fun of me. I've had a few compliments. You told me earlier your husband works in the hockey world where they're a little more macho, but I think in my world it's just fine.
I'm glad to hear it. Keep it up.
Okay.
What were you like as a kid?
A bit nerdy, maybe. I wasn't expecting that question. I did quite a lot of sports, like not hockey, football, but more tennis and squash and stuff like that. I went to Cambridge, England, as an undergraduate at the age of 18, and so I don't know if you've heard of John Maynard Keynes, but I was just old enough to be taught by his direct disciples. So, not being a genius, I emerged a Keynesian, and then my life went on from there.
So you did go to Cambridge. You also went to the Sorbonne, and you went to McGill. But did you ever consider staying overseas? Was that ever something that was in the cards?
At one point I did when I was an undergraduate at Cambridge, and then I went to Paris. But I then decided I wanted to do my PhD in Canadian economic history, and you can't really do Canadian economic history overseas because they don't really study it that much. So I did things in a backwards order. Instead of going to my home university in a way, I went away, and then I came back home to McGill. Right. And then after that, I just ended up in Canada. Things took their... I didn't plan anything, but it just turned out that I've worked, other than those years abroad, I haven't really lived outside Canada. I've spent a lot of time visiting outside Canada, but my career has been in the country.
Do you come from a big family?
I have two sisters, one brother. So in my day, that was kind of average. Yeah. Nowadays, it would be
big.
Fairly big, yeah.
Where do you place?
I'm the oldest.
Are you really?
Yeah.
So do you have the traditional characteristics of a first child? Are you kind of nose to the grindstone and a high achiever? Do you see those as being characteristics that describe your personality?
I guess I want to do things. So in that sense, I have worked. I guess you could call me a high achiever. I'm not sure I'm nose to the grindstone. I also have some fun, but I try to achieve certain things. That's a fair statement.
Yeah. And what were your parents like? Or what, I mean, your mother is still alive.
My mother is still alive. My father is not. My father was an actuary, and my mother stayed at home. And I think we had a great time as a child. Fairly traditional 50s, 60s families. The father works, the mother stays at home. But they were great. I had a great time growing up.
Yeah. Were you precocious?
Yeah. Okay. At school, I was kind of known as the brain guy, and I came first in the class and all of that. But that was being a big fish in a little pond. And then when I went to Cambridge, I was by no means top of the class. So I was top of the class and a precocious or a brainy guy in a little pond. But when I got out into the bigger world, I wasn't really quite so special anymore.
So tell me what that was like, to go from a little environment where you are the big smart fish to being, you know, a pretty good but maybe not so colorful fish in a sea of very colorful other fish.
Right.
How did you react to that?
It takes a little bit of adjustment, right? You don't really think it's subconscious, but subconsciously you think you're pretty smart when you come from that little pond. So when you go abroad and in a much bigger ocean, you gradually dawns on you that you're not the be-all and end-all, and that's healthy because you don't want to go through life with delusions of being smarter than you are.
No,
so I think that that was great. I mean, at Cambridge, some of the people I went to Cambridge with are still among my best friends. We keep in touch. We had a fantastic time. But I did at that time realize that, you know, there are big oceans in this world, and one adapts to that.
Yeah. Tell me why you went to Cambridge at all.
Well, it was a bit unusual to go as an 18-year-old. The principal of my school suggested it because he'd been to Cambridge, so I guess that it was kind of a fluke that that's the way it happened. So I had good marks, as I just said, so they let me in, and I had a fantastic time. It was one of the happiest times of my life. You know, we had a great pubs, great learning, great atmosphere, great friends that I still have to this day.
I like how you listed pubs first, though. I think that's probably what everyone would, that's generally the university experience.
Exactly.
So you came back to Canada to study something that is not necessarily what other people are going to study. I mean, that's a very specific field that you chose. Did you have a long-term goal? Did you think, oh, I would like to work for the Royal Bank, or I want to be in academia?
Well, it's funny you ask me that, because, I mean, everything in my life has been kind of chance as opposed to plan. Like when I went to Cambridge, unlike Canadian universities, you have to choose one subject. And I didn't want to do pure math, and I didn't want to do pure humanities. I wanted to do something that had both. And the only thing that I could think of was economics, which is kind of in the middle. I knew nothing about economics, but I chose economics just by a process of elimination. And then I went into the academic world, and 6 months before I joined the Royal Bank, I never thought I would ever work for a bank, but it just kind of happened.
Right.
And then after banking, 6 months before I left the Royal Bank for politics, I never really thought I would ever be in politics. So you're asking me if I had a plan, and the short answer is no.
None.
Neither for economics, nor for banking, nor for politics. It just, circumstances just kind of happened.
And did you like what you'd chosen to study?
Yeah, I really did, because unknown to me, the greatest economist of the 20th century, John Maynard Keynes, was from Cambridge. I hadn't even heard of him before I went there. And my teachers were his direct disciples. So I was really into sort of an elite atmosphere of the home of the greatest economist. But that has its downside, too, because as an 18-year-old, when you're indoctrinated by these people who are true believers, so you emerge a Keynesian, and that means you believe in more government intervention, and you think that deficits are okay, and that sort of thing. But then over time, starting from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, I kind of retreated from the pure Keynesian view that I was taught at university, because it didn't seem to conform to the world. So I kind of became a reconstructed Keynesian, if you like, until a couple of years ago when we had the crisis, and then Keynes came back from the dead, because all the governments, all the governments around the world, the most conservative governments, they all agreed we needed big deficits, we needed to stimulate the economy. Well, that's Keynesian. So he kind of died over the last 30 years or so, and then he came back to life.
Resurrected.
Yes.
Huh. Did you like academia?
I loved it. Everywhere I mean, I've had 3 careers, and in all cases it was a pull rather than a push. I liked academia a lot. I was there for so long, 18 years at different universities, and I loved teaching, and I loved research, and I loved the life. But then this opportunity came along to go to Royal Bank as Chief Economist, so I took it. And I really enjoyed Royal Bank, and I could have stayed there longer, but then along came politics, and I said, okay, and so I went there.
So, okay, so we're going to jump ahead here, and I'll have to come back, but
okay.
You had a very prestigious, I have got to assume, well-paying secure job with the Royal Bank. You're one of the most visible economists in the country. And someone comes along and says, why don't you run for politics?
Yeah.
And then you have to run. You have to earn the support of the electorate. You have to keep earning the support of the electorate. You don't earn as much money. It's really not that secure. Why would you do it?
Well, my wife says because I'm crazy.
Okay, I was.
But let me tell the
might be.
story. Let me go back 3 years.
Okay.
And this involves your father.
Oh, dear.
Joe Clark.
Uh-huh.
In about 1997,
Yes.
3 years before I went into politics as a Liberal, he approached me, would I like to run for the Conservative Party?
Progressive.
Progressive Conservative
Yes.
Party. And I could have done it. Now, the circumstances weren't right.
Right.
But the reason I'm saying that is because whereas between Joe Clark and me, there was no huge ideological or philosophical gap in terms of what we thought Canada should be. Flash forward 3 years when I was approached by the Liberals, and it was the Reform Party versus the Liberals, and there was a huge yawning gap. This is nothing personal, but just where Stockwell Day stood for the future of Canada versus Jean Chrétien. There was an enormous gap, and I was totally opposed to the Reform Party vision for Canada, whether you're talking about social conservatism, whether you're talking about an emasculation of the federal government's role and everything except defense and monetary policy go to provinces, or whether you're talking about policies favoring high-income Canadians like the flat tax. So for all of those reasons, my vision of Canada was totally different from the Reform Party vision and well aligned with the Liberals, or it could have been well aligned with the Progressive Conservatives earlier on. And so why did I do it? Well, partly because I was flattered to be approached by, first of all, Senator David Smith, and then I met Mr. Chrétien before accepting, but also because what the Liberals stood for was what I stood for, and in sharp contrast to what Reform stood for. Had it been Jean Chrétien versus Joe Clark, I probably would have not have done it because the differences are fairly minor compared with the differences between Jean Chrétien and Stockwell Day.
So tell me about this conversation that led to your decision to accept, both with your wife, with your children, with friends. Were they supportive? I mean,
well, my wife was supportive in the sense that she fully supported my decision. She could tell is what I really wanted to do, and if I didn't do it, she thought I would always regret that. So I don't think it was her first choice, but she supported me all the way. Right. And what I would say to you, Catherine, is that if there's any hero in this, I mean, this lasted about 5 minutes, but people
Did it? Really?
Well, people would say to me, oh, what a hero you are. You take a big salary cut and you go into politics. Now, that lasted 5 minutes, and then you're a politician and everybody forgets it. But I'm not a hero at all because I was doing precisely what I wanted to do. I mean, it was my choice to go into politics and have a lower salary. But if there's any hero, it's the wife or the husband of the politician, because I get the fun of politics, which is what I want to do, and my wife gets at least a half, if not more, of the sacrifice in terms of time away from family and lower income. So I'm not saying either of us is a hero, but if there is one, it's her, not me.
How did you meet her?
Oh.
This is your wife.
Okay, now, she was a student of mine at Simon Fraser. She's Chinese Malaysian, and this was in my very early days as a teacher. I was 28 years old at Simon Fraser, and I remember my first class. I was a very eager beaver young professor. My first class was a small class. There were 7 students sitting around the table, and my future wife said to me, "What's the prof like?"
To you?
To me. Because I didn't have gray hair then. I was 28. I looked very young, and she thought I was a student. And I said, well, I hear he's great. And then she told me later when I stood up and said I was a professor, she almost
died?
Almost quit
Crawled
class.
under the table?
Almost dropped out of the course.
Oh.
But anyway, we got to know each other after the grades were handed in. And, and then we got married.
Now, there's a story leading up to getting married, though. It wasn't quite as simple as that.
No.
You didn't just get married.
Well, we decided to get married. Mm-hmm. This was just over 30 years ago. And then she said, well, she'd go home to Malaysia to tell her family as a courtesy. And she went home to her family in a small town in Malaysia where her parents don't speak a word of English, and they think everyone in North America takes drugs and gets divorces. And so her parents, her father in particular, didn't want her to get married to me at all. No personal insult, but basically because I'm white. And so he took away her passport, and she was essentially under house arrest at home for 6 months. I was out of contact. Well, I had a little spy or two, a couple of her brothers, until the parents found out they were spies. But it lasted for a while. What happened was, after about 6 months, she managed to convince her parents that I was out of the picture. So she was allowed to go to Singapore for a job interview with Hewlett-Packard, and her brothers told me that. So I flew from Vancouver to Hewlett-Packard and was sitting outside the interview room when she was having her interview. So that's how we got together again.
And then what, did you just leave from Singapore back home?
Singapore is so rigid. We tried to get married. She didn't have a passport. Oh. And in those days, the Canadian authorities would let us in as if we were married without a passport. But Singapore wouldn't let us get married because we had to be there for a certain length of time or whatever. And so what happened was she phoned her uncle, who was a justice of the peace, paradoxically white, just across the border in Malaysia, and he said he'd marry us at the cricket club. He was a white imperial kind of guy. But the problem was his wife, my wife's mother's sister, was listening on the other line.
What intrigue!
And she called my wife's mother and said to her that your daughter's about to elope. So then we had to change our plans. And the only thing that saved us was the aunt had a reputation of being such a gossip that in the end the mother didn't believe the story.
Wonderful. Holy family dynamics.
Yeah, right. Well, now I'm the favorite son-in-law.
Are
but
you?
It took 10 years.
So did they not talk to you? Or did you ever see them?
I never met her. Well, you see, after that, we couldn't get married, but Nancy got the job with Hewlett-Packard, so she would then get her passport. So we agreed some months later I'd come back with my parents and my grandmother because we thought Chinese respected the older generation. So we got married in the hope that her parents would then accept it. But they didn't. They just wanted us to be gone, so we were. And some 10 years later...
So did she leave the job at Hewlett-Packard too?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then some 10 years later, and we had 3 boys. And Chinese love boys, right? And her other brothers and sisters had only girls. But that still didn't do the job because these were half-white boys, I guess. I'm sure Chinese girls might be better. But eventually they came around to it, and we got along just fine.
How unusual.
Well, I'm not sure it's that unusual.
Really?
There are a lot of, well, I don't know stories exactly like mine, but there are a lot of troubles around the world with interracial marriages. I don't think we're the first to have a difficulty like that.
What made you want to stick it out? Not I mean, in the long run, but in that time period when there was obviously such a massive source of tension between her and her parents, and I mean, you had to fly to Singapore even just to see her. What made you not throw in the towel and just say, look, this is going to be too difficult?
Well, I guess because I loved her. Simple answer. And she didn't give up on me, and so it had a happy ending.
That's really great. That's really something to tell your grandkids, too. And hopefully you won't do the same to them as was done to you.
No, my parents were totally open to a Chinese daughter-in-law. Not a problem at all.
Right.
It was just her side that was a problem.
Isn't that fascinating? Wow. So you have 3 sons.
Right.
And how did they react to your decision to run?
Well, they were a bit younger then. Well, not that young. The oldest was, they ranged in age from, I guess, 11 to 18 or 19. None of them had really had an involvement in politics. I had not had an involvement in politics since my student days at Cambridge. I generally voted Liberal, but I was never a card-carrying member of any party. And so I think, so it wasn't as if they were terribly enthusiastic, but I think their reaction was, well, look, if that's what you want to do, we fully support you. And so they did. And they've been very supportive ever since. Now, one thing is that we decided to stay in Oakville, even though my riding is Markham. I have a residence in Markham, but we maintained our main residence in Oakville because it was enough that I was doing to disrupt their lives and to take them out of school and force them to change schools right in the middle of school. We didn't want to do that. So there was some continuity in their lives. But, you know, I'm grateful to my children and my wife for being so supportive, even though politics, it's an understatement to say politics was certainly not in any of their genes.
Now, you're here in Ottawa during the week. What do you do when you're not working, or are you always working?
In Ottawa?
Yeah.
I can't say I'm always working, but I've spent virtually no time in my apartment except for sleeping there. So there are various events, or I'm working in my office, or I'm going out to dinner with people, I'm going to receptions, I'm going to meetings. So basically it's either socializing mainly with MPs, or going to meetings, or being in the House, or doing the things that members of Parliament do when I'm in Ottawa. So I really spend essentially no time except to go to sleep in my apartment, and I'm out and about doing various things.
Do you still play squash or tennis?
I play tennis. I play golf.
Oh, good.
I go skiing. I'm not very good at, well, I'm not bad at skiing. I guess that's my best.
I've heard that you are a graceful
But
skier.
I'm okay. I'm a lousy golfer, but I enjoy the game.
Is that because it's a social game? It's kind of like being on Parliament Hill with only 4 people?
Actually, we don't do that so much anymore, but we used to play all the time on the weekend with my wife and me and 2 of our sons.
Oh, that is nice.
And so, you know, golf is often an anti-family thing because men go off and play with other men and leave the wife and the kids at home. But in our case, it was the opposite. It was a good chance for at least 2 of our 3 sons and my wife and me to be on the golf course for 4 hours.
Right.
And that was a very good way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, have fun playing golf and be with one's family at the same time.
You have written 2 books on economics. Is that fair to say?
I think I've written a bit more, but that's all right.
So how many have you written?
Depends how you define a book.
Okay.
Sometimes they say 8, but...
that's definitely a bit more.
Well,
so you are a prolific writer. Are you also a prolific reader?
Yes.
What do you read? Do you read books on economics? Or do you read...
I read a variety of things. You know, I read this... I remember Robert Bourassa said his favorite reading was The Economist magazine, and I remember the reaction was how deadly boring. But I'd say the same. I read The Economist magazine as the first thing to just make sure I know what's going on. But I also like to read sort of light novels and some economic stuff or history, and but a good deal of sort of best-selling light stuff as well.
You do,
so I'm
right?
not just reading turgid economics all the time.
How do you relax at the end of a day? I mean, what do you do that's just for yourself? Some people go and read a chapter of a book before bed. Some people watch TV. Do you have a specific way that you relax?
Well, I'd like to go out somewhere with my wife from time to time when I'm home, and
that's nice.
Movies or whatever, and I do read, and I must confess I watch TV from time to time. I'm also a bit of a political junkie. So, yeah, I do all of those things, and I'm quite relaxed. I don't really get too uptight about stuff.
Well, you know, that's a very interesting thing that you've just said, because I think that the general reaction to a lot of politicians, and I think, I mean, my perception of you is that there's a seriousness to everything. That when you see a politician in a scrum or speaking to the media in any capacity, that they look serious and often quite unhappy, angry perhaps. And are you a serious person? Is that a fair assessment of
Well, yes and
are?
no. I think in terms of what I said earlier about why I wanted to join the Liberals and I didn't agree at all with the Reform Party vision of the country, I guess that's pretty serious. That comes down to your fundamental beliefs about what this country should be about. But I also think I have a sense of humor. I think I don't take myself too seriously. I think when I'm on panels on TV, I'm not always serious and angry. I
No.
think we joke around a bit and we laugh. So
Yeah.
I think we have a good time as well. So there's a fun side, a joking side. But you have to be careful talking to the media on the fun side, joking side, because sometimes that can be taken the wrong way. Mm-hmm. So you have to be careful. But I think I think the worst kind of politician is one who takes himself or herself far too seriously, mm-hmm. or one who thinks he or she is God's gift to Canada just because they might be in the cabinet. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the tricks is not to take yourself too seriously and not to think you're God's gift to the country, because you're not. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there's a serious side. One is in politics, as you said. I mean, I'm not in politics for the money. I'm in politics because there's certain things about this country I believe in, and I want to work with my colleagues to try to achieve those things. But it doesn't mean you have to be dour and serious and angry all the time.
No. You probably felt, maybe you didn't, but you had positions within cabinet where you could make a tangible difference. Mm-hmm. And now you are across the aisle in opposition. And the ability to make a difference is tempered a bit by that fact. Did it ever occur to you to possibly leave politics?
Tempered more than a bit,
okay.
in terms of making things happen. No, I think we deserved a time out. You know, you can't go on governing forever. We had a very long time in government. There were various problems and deficiencies that we Liberals had. So I'm not denying that it was probably time for a change.
But for you personally, did you ever think of leaving it?
That thought entered my mind, but I'm hopeful that we will be back in government in the not-too-distant future, and that we will then again be able to do what we think is good for the country. And I'm not pessimistic. I'm relatively optimistic that in the not-too-distant future, don't ask me exactly when, I don't know, that we can win an election and reform the government again. And we're all of us in the Liberal Party working very hard to that end.
So after that, what's your next career change?
I don't know. I told you before, I never plan, right?
Right.
6 months before banking, I never knew I'd be a banker. 6 months before politics, I never knew I'd be a politician. So I don't know. I'm happy doing what I'm doing for the foreseeable future, and I have no plans for doing something else, but one can never say that that will never happen, especially given my own past.
Golf pro, maybe?
Golf pro. I'd say ski pro would be more likely than golf pro, but neither is very likely.
Thank you so much for taking
the time
Catherine. It was a great pleasure to chat with you.
It. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.